Hello, and welcome everyone to our first Inspire Students Roundtable of the semester. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for all of the people joining us online. I'm Saif, a second-year IRPS student, and I work at the Alumni Relations Office with Karine, Charlotte, and Alexi. Before introducing the topic and our panelists, some practical information. This session will be recorded for those who are not able to attend today. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so if you are joining us online, please use the Q&A function, and for the ones present, feel free to ask your questions at the end of the roundtable. You can ask your questions, of course, in either French or in English. This roundtable is part of the Alumni Month, which is organized every year by the Alumni Office, including a series of roundtables every Wednesday. The next roundtable will be on the private sector, and the ones after that on sustainability and entrepreneurship and art. The goal of this Inspire Students project is to connect current students with alumni of the Institute to learn from each other. A big thank you to Tiffany, our career advisor, for moderating today's roundtable. Today, we have the great chance to have two amazing panelists and recent graduates who work in different sectors, but who share an interest in matters relating to international organizations and NGOs and the challenges they face in the present political moment. Thank you for being with us today and for taking the time to share your experiences. First, we have Laura Steiner, who is here in person. Hello, Laura. A graduate of the MINT 2024 Migration, Boundaries and Mobilities Program. She is a campaigning intern for freedom of expression and civic space at Amnesty International Switzerland. Since joining in August 2024, she has contributed to the Protect the Protest campaign, advocating for the right to peaceful assembly. During her time at the Institute, she worked with the NGO No Name Kitchen in Ventimiglia, Italy, where she and her team provided humanitarian aid to people on the move and monitored border conditions with neighboring friends. This experience laid the foundation for her master's thesis on human rights violations at the Franco-Italian border. Laura is deeply committed to human rights and has a strong interest in grassroots activism and the role of civil society in driving change. Joining us online from Paris is Jasmine Have, a graduate of the ANSO 2023 program, who is a program coordination consultant at UNESCO, where she supports the management and implementation of the Island Watch initiative. Since joining in November 2023, she has played a key role in internal coordination, liaising with UNESCO teams, external partners, and member states to ensure effective project execution. She also contributed to resource mobilization efforts and facilitated UNESCO's participation in the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States. I will now hand it over to Tiffany, today's moderator.
Thank you, Saif. So hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany. I'm a career advisor within the Career Services. Just a quick word on the Career Services. If you're not yet familiar with us, hopefully you are by now. But we empower students through their professional journey, maybe through workshops, individual meetings, and career events that we just had. One of the biggest career events of the year, just yesterday and the day before, the IO Career Days. That's what we do. And so back to the roundtable. So we'll get started right away with general questions, and then we'll move on to more specific questions to our panelists. So first general question to both of you, Laura and Jasmine. And we'll start maybe with Laura. Did you have a clear idea of the ideal job when you graduated from the Institute? And second question, and that question would be, what resources at the Institute do you feel have been the most important in your professional journey and that present students could maybe harness? So,
thank you very much, and hello everyone. So for your question, no, I had no clear idea, and to be honest, I still don't. I still don't know where I'm going, and I think this is also the advantage of our studies. They're very broad and open, which on a good day makes you feel like, okay, you're very flexible and adaptable, and the world is open to your skills. And on a bad day, I experienced maybe some doubts about me not having a specific enough expertise in anything, given that I study in an interdisciplinary program. And what really helped me was actually looking at 1 or 2 job openings I was really interested in, and then seeking the Career Services help. And I had a CV check, I had some tips for the interview, and that was really helpful, and it also got me the internship where I'm right now.
Well, I didn't, tell her.
Yeah, I'm not paid or
I didn't
anything.
even know she was going to say this. Okay, thank you, Laura.
Sure.
And Jasmine, do you want me maybe to repeat the question?
No, I think I have the question. First of all, thank you so much.
Jasmine, we can't hear you really well. Maybe we could just up the volume. I don't know if it's possible. And if you could try speaking, Jasmine, so that we can see and check. No, we can't really hear you right now. You're cutting in and out. Et là, le volume, il est déjà bien. Ah, okay.
Can you try talking closer to your mic, Jasmine?
Hello.
Yeah,
Much
that's
better when you're closer.
Much better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, yeah. So thank you so much for inviting me over. I wish I could be there. I miss Geneva a lot. But just to answer your question, well, I think I share that with Laura. I have no kind of really specific fixed career plan in mind.
Sorry, Jasmine, to cut you. Can anybody in the room hear clearly? Because it's quite a low. So, sorry to bother you. Yeah, if you can try
Maybe, yeah, the earphones.
the earphones. Tiny bit, et là c'est déjà au max. I don't know if it's possible, and I know it might not be the most comfortable, but
Could you try again?
Hello.
Try muting the room.
muting the room.
Mais après, on entend plus qu'ici.
Ouais, mais pour sa réponse.
That's true.
Hello. Okay, I can't hear you for some reason, but I guess I'll just continue talking. Okay, so I was just saying that basically I didn't really have kind of a specific idea of what I wanted to do. I think I had the general interest of working in climate, kind of sustainable development related issues, but I generally remained very open to different roles, especially within this sector. I also did the ANSO program, so I also had, well, when I spoke to a lot of my peers in my year, I think a lot of people had the intention to kind of eventually get into academia, which was not something on the radar for me when I started at the Institute. So I was always, I had this question of like, what do anthropologists do after their studies? So I kind of spent a lot of my time like looking out for other ways and resources, at the Institute that could kind of help me direction my career. And I also tapped into the career services. I actually went also into the CV. I tailored my CV workshop that the career services provided, and that was really useful, especially as someone who didn't really have much kind of IO experience beforehand. I think tapping into the alumni community was really helpful as well. Just speaking to recent graduates was really, especially those who have entered, international organizations, was really key in terms of gaining insight and, just the recruitment processes, how are that like? And actually also spoke to a TA, and I spoke to him about my concerns about what I want to do after uni. And he actually told me to look into UNESCO. So that's kind of how it started. I also seeked out some volunteer opportunities. I think I did small volunteering roles at certain events in IOs in Geneva, which was also a really nice kind of way of being exposed into this kind of sector and kind of observing the operations, and also a nice way to make connections. Even if, it was just volunteering, it was not so technical, it was a nice exposure. Yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, we were able to hear you clearly. Thank you again for referring to our different services and alumni as well. Now, the next question, I think is going to be very interesting also for second year students who might be, asking themselves questions about what's going to be the next step after their graduation. So how was your journey like going from the end of your studies until now? And could you share some of your struggles and successes? And we'll start with you, Jasmine, this time around.
Okay, yeah, so I actually secured an internship at UNESCO basically in the final month of my thesis. So it was a very stressful period actually because I was balancing, deadlines and then, starting a new like professional role, which was like my first, internship at such a big organization. But somehow managed to juggle kind of both. And I was just very happy to have submitted my thesis and just focus on one thing. Um, yeah, it was very stressful. I think one of the main challenges for me was kind of transitioning from a very kind of research heavy academic program into kind of a more applied work environment. I enjoyed my studies thoroughly, but I think there were a lot of like more practical skills that weren't necessarily super emphasized in my program that I had to kind of pick up very quickly. And as well, like, I've moved to UNESCO headquarters, which is, you're surrounded by a lot of professionals, very impressive careers, with extensive experience, and you just got out of the university. It can be a very intimidating space, especially, like again, I said, I didn't really have much experience beforehand. So I think I experienced very severe imposter syndrome. It really felt like I was kind of thrown into the deep ends and expected to swim. You know, within IOs, there's a lot of processes to learn, acronyms. A lot of people are very busy, so you don't really have kind of someone there to kind of guide you step by step. And it was a very daunting experience for me personally, but it was also a nice kind of, my internship was a nice 6 months for me to kind of gradually build this confidence in my abilities. Yeah, it was a very pivotal moment for my career, I think. But yeah, it was challenging. I won't lie about that.
Thank you, Jasmine. And Laura?
Yeah, my experience relates to what you just said, Jasmine. I also got my internship while I was still writing my thesis, and I was really happy about that. On the other hand, I think leaving the institute was actually really hard, or leaving your studies, because you're in this cocoon at the institute. You have access to a lot of knowledge, to a lot of interesting people, and leaving that for a completely different schedule, as you mentioned, and completely different set of rules, I would say, is a bit intimidating at first, and it's also, yeah, something just completely new, which can be scary, or at least it was for me. But I think that's just also within the nature of a transitioning period, and yeah, going into something new. So yeah, I think it's just part of a process we're in, and we're getting used to, or I'm getting used to having a different routine now, even though I do miss this place sometimes.
So it takes time to adjust. Thank you. So you'll go first, Laura. What does your daily work look like? And can you give us a snapshot?
So my tasks vary a lot, actually. And as you mentioned before, I'm working on a campaign that advocates for the right to protest in Switzerland. And what I'm doing there is I'm supporting two colleagues of mine in writing a research briefing. And this has been very interesting. We're looking at 6 cities in Switzerland and their legal framework, and their compliance also with the human right of freedom of expression and assembly. So I've been helping my two colleagues with mainly legal desk research, and I also conducted some interviews for this research briefing, and that was really interesting and also somewhat similar to what I used to do in my studies. And this report will feed into a big relaunch of a campaign that we have in mid-March, so we've been working a lot on that as well. We've been working with a marketing agency to have this relaunch of the campaign, and it's been really interesting to follow this process. And then, of course, I mean, I'm an intern, so I also have admin things to do. I schedule meetings, I write a newsletter. So those are maybe a bit less fun, or they take less brain capacity, but they still need to be done, and they also help you to stay organized and get to know your way around the tools that you need in the office.
Thank you. And Jasmine?
Yeah, so just to give you a bit of context, so I'm working at UNESCO's SID section, so Small Island Developing States. And basically our team is it's a coordinating unit, so we coordinate all projects related to SIDS across different sectors within UNESCO, and SIDS is a priority group, so we engage across the house. And we're really working on kind of bridging communication between different teams within UNESCO, but also member states and external partners. And I started as an intern for 6 months, and then I'm now a consultant. So now since my start of my consultancy, I'm more focusing on coordinating a specific initiative called Island Watch. It's a UNESCO pilot program working on 9 different SIDS. I guess just to give like a snapshot of my typical day, I think it's very different every day, but generally, I can start off reviewing project updates, kind of responding to any internal coordination requests, preparing reports, preparing for important meetings. We work with different teams within UNESCO, but also, partners, donors, member states. We spend time just kind of negotiating any priorities or discussing, different project progresses and addressing any challenges, because I think there's a lot of crises that we have to manage here and there. And then, following up on any kind of meeting action points. And, I'm working towards piloting these programs. So we just did a launch in Seychelles and Mauritius. So I did my first mission last year, which was really fun and really cool as well. And it's great to go to Seychelles and Mauritius as well. A really cool experience. But yeah, we have more SIDS upcoming, and yeah, I think very stressful, but keeps you on your toes. And yeah.
Thank you. Jasmine, what advice would you give to your slightly younger self um, from, a year ago, from when you graduated?
I think it was muted, sorry.
Yes. We're all ears.
I think if I were to go back a year ago, I think I would tell myself different things. I mean, I think the first thing would be stop doubting yourself. I think I spent way too much time feeling like I wasn't very qualified enough and I had no business working in the sector, and especially my role in particular being in this coordination role where, your job is really just telling people kind of what to do and making sure they do it, which is kind of intimidating, and you're not sure how to kind of deal with that, especially being a young professional and you're, speaking to more senior people. It's a bit of an awkward thing. But I think not many people, have things figured out at the get-go, and, you build your confidence through your experience. So I would tell myself that you're more than capable than you think. And I think also to take ownership of your work. I think one of the defining moments in my work so far was that I was kind of left to lead some coordination efforts alone, especially during the summer months. And, it was very suddenly I was kind of thrown into this responsibility, and I had to kind of step up. And that was on the one hand really traumatizing, but because I didn't have any guidance whatsoever, so I was really left on my own for the first time. And usually I had some kind of guidance, but in the end, this was a very valuable experience, and it was a nice way for me to kind of realize my potential and like you can have a voice. And so that was really cool. And the last thing would probably be, don't be shy to talk to people. I think I'm generally a shy person, so reaching out and knocking on to people's doors is an intimidating process, especially in this, in this space where people are often very busy. But I quickly learned, not working is not just about being annoying and asking for jobs, but also it's a learning experience. It's about you kind of understanding also the culture of the organization and also finding mentorship. I think uh, don't be afraid to just knock on people's doors and learn from others. And if you don't then it's a nice excuse to get a coffee, I guess.
Up to you, Laura.
Yes. So I think my advice to myself from a year ago would be open. I mean, I graduated in migration, and now I'm doing something not really related to my interest in asylum policies. But it's still an experience where I learn a lot and I get to deconstruct a lot of my own biases and doubts. So I'm really happy for this experience. So my first advice would be just be open even to go beyond the field of your interest. And the second one, it's also okay to take your time. I think especially in the last months of the second year, there's a lot of pressure and it feels very stressful and you're I mean, some people also have visa issues which are serious, but yeah, I think if you can, it's also good to take some time for yourself and yeah, allow yourself to find something that really satisfies you, and yeah, pursue it if you can, and don't be too hard on yourself if you don't find something right away, because I had a lot of friends of mine who struggle with that. And then one in particular ended up getting something she really, really liked. So I think it's totally possible, even though, especially at this time around, it seems, yeah, the chances or the odds don't look too great.
Thank you, Laura. Talking about these times, so it's a nice segue into the next question to both of you, and we'll start with this time you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced working in an IO, NGO, in a time of current political crisis, and how are you adapting to overcome them?
So I have to mention that Amnesty is an independent organization, so we're not directly affected by some funding issues, for example. But of course, we are impacted by the current climate, and there's a big feeling of helplessness and a lot of worries for the future, at least for me, and also for our organization. And I think this is what shows us that it's more important than ever to stand up for human rights and to be a community, to be in solidarity also with marginalized people, and to fight fascism.
And is it something, just to follow up, is it something that you see already, even if Amnesty is not directly affected by, this time? Do you see it showing up in your daily life or, in the conversations at work or adjusting in any kind of way in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I work in defending civic space, right? And I think the civic space is under threat globally. Now, for our work, I think it affects a lot of my colleagues, mostly those who work on more international topics. I work on a very national one. So I'd say, yeah, for them, it's been very hard the past couple of weeks. But there was this new boost of motivation, I guess, or of realizing that it's very urgent to act and to stand together as human rights organizations.
Thank you. And Jasmine?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges was in working, in IO, especially during, times of crises, is really this tension between kind of urgency and bureaucracy, especially working, in SIDS, we're tackling with very kind of critical issues like climate change and, natural disasters, and that often need kind of immediate action. So at the same time, you're also working in such a big institution where, things are complex and multi-layered, and, decision-making processes can take time, and it involves many different kind of people with different priorities. And I think navigating through this can be a very frustrating environment, especially when you're kind of eager to kind of push forward your project, your initiative. I think that said, I think it's a space where one can really strengthen your abilities to think very strategically, learn when to kind of push and when to step back, and also allow certain dynamics to unfold, but also learn how to kind of problems solve in creative ways, find alternative pathways to kind of keep the momentum going, especially when you're dealing with a lot of bureaucratic constraints. I think it's also important in this space to remain patient and but also persistent. And I also realized that tapping into kind of your internal networks, often connections and stuff, can really help facilitate and accelerate the processes. So it's been really interesting kind of learning these things, especially in the work that we're doing. But there's also, despite all these frustrations, there's also many moments where, that keeps me going. And there are like, I guess I get reminded how, I guess, the beauty of international cooperation and what they can do. So it's not all very bad, is what I was trying to say. It's still quite inspiring, and yeah, I guess that's.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, so moving on to the specific questions, starting with you, Laura. So you work with Amnesty International Switzerland. You have volunteered and worked with No Name Kitchen that has centered on protecting civic space and volunteering with people on the move. How do you see local volunteer work and activism having an impact on the international level?
Maybe let me start with my first experience, the one I had with No Name Kitchen. So what we did, my team and I, we were active in a border region between Italy and France. Many people on the move were stranded there because they were refused entry into France. So they were living in makeshift camps, actually, because there was a lack of infrastructure present in Ventimiglia. And what we did was providing hot showers. We also had a laundry service, and we did some border monitoring. And the organization was actually really small. It was more of a movement, really. And I was not aware of this when I was going into the experience. And I think also coming from the Institute, I had kind of high hopes of making an impact or making a big difference. And I just saw that, yeah, we were this small and the problems were this big. And a really important takeaway I got from this experience is that for me, activism starts in a very simple conversation or in a very just humane gesture interaction between two people. And for me, that's the foundation of everything that follows after. Every international cooperation whatsoever is just the contact between two humans. And I think that's what drives my activism and still does. And it was a really important takeaway from this experience. Now with Amnesty, it's completely different, of course, because they're a big player and they are on the international level and they do have somewhat of a political influence. And what I like mostly there is that they operate on different levels. So they're active internationally, they're advocating for human rights at the UN, but then they're also working nationally in the different sections, just like my project, the Protect the Protest campaign. And they're also active on the very low levels, so they're engaging with activists and volunteers who know the problems on the ground and who have the expertise of more specific problems and can help us with our advocacy efforts. And I think that's that's a big advantage of Amnesty, is that it reunites those three levels. And it's also a great way to start to get a foot maybe into an organization by volunteering or by being an activist. And I can see it even in my office. We got a new person who was very active in the Yes Means Yes campaign last year. She was really active in that, and now she got a job with Amnesty. So I think it's a great way to start.
Awesome, thank you. To you, Jasmine, you had mentioned already in some of the answers that you gave that it was quite challenging to get into UNESCO, like to settle into it and to get into a rhythm. And you mentioned certain skills that you had to develop. So based on your experience there at UNESCO, what key skills and strategies would you recommend to students interested in building a career in an international organization, especially when working on complex multi-stakeholder projects?
Yeah, I think I can speak especially from my experience. I came from an ANSO disciplinary program, which is much more, I guess, research focused. So transitioning, like I said, into an IEO was kind of a leap, at least for me. But I think it's important to kind of embrace this uncertain period and trust this very steep learning curve. Like I said, it can be overwhelming. But I think what's most important is your ability to kind of learn, adapt, communicate, effectively. Specifically with my experience, strategically communicating to different types of people was a skill I've had to kind of develop quickly. We're dealing with many different types of people with different interests, and you have to kind of understand the landscape you're working with and have this level of awareness and be able to also frame like issues well to prevent any misunderstandings and to ensure the project keeps going. And also in coordination roles, I feel like it's also very important to make sure different people feel valued and involved in the projects. I think that's a very important thing. I think generally any type of international exposure is really helpful. Right now we're partnering up with a South African company, and I did my exchange in South Africa while I was in the graduate institute, and that was really nice just to even just relate to someone, a partner, in a more personal level, and that's a great enhances relationships. And makes the work a bit more enjoyable. I think being adaptable and doing a lot of problem solving. I think you're navigating very unexpected situations. So, projects might go certain ways, and just being able to kind of be adaptable, flexible. I also realize I'm not super blessed with my language skills, unfortunately, but I think fluency in some languages actually can open a lot of doors in terms of working in the UN. And I think one important thing would also be understanding different IO structures. I think they're complex ecosystems in themselves, and I think familiarizing yourself with how they work and key documents, key strategies, and things will help you. Also in your interviews, for example. And yeah, just networking, whatever that means. Just tapping into kind of the connections, and I think you can learn a lot from and getting a lot of insight from just speaking to people.
Thank you, Jasmine. So communication, adaptability, having some multicultural experience and languages would be good to develop. Okay, thank you so much. I think this concludes this part of the session. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A. So we have a little bit more time for Q&A than expected, so that's good. So now I guess it's back to you, students, if you have any questions for Luna.
This is for Jasmine, because you mentioned about volunteering and how it's like a really good way to gain experience, and I've heard that when they see that you've done volunteering in your city, it's like a really big bonus point. So I wanted to ask if you have any suggestions in Geneva that you've been to.
Yeah, so I think I found one volunteer opportunity through the career website. I think there was an event at UNHCR, and I was just helping there at the conference. And that was just a nice way to kind of get some kind of exposure on how things work there, and I also got some nice connections through that. I think it was just a weekend thing, actually. It was very short. But that's kind of what I did. I looked into the career page, and that was really helpful.
Thank you. If I can add something to that,
Yeah,
I think even joining a student initiative shows
Yeah.
your engagement and shows that you care about something. So I think that's a good way to start even within the institute.
Yeah, I forgot to mention like before that I actually joined the welfare committee in my last semester, and I actually really value that experience because you're working in a small team towards reaching certain objectives, and I think that was a very nice experience to have in preparation for my internship after university. So I agree with that.
Just to clarify, Jasmine, you did not have any professional experience prior to joining UNESCO as an intern?
No, I guess I did. I graduated my undergrad and then it was COVID, so I took a year off during that time, and I managed to find small kind of. I worked in a lot of startups, sustainability-based startups, but nothing with IOs or at that scale. I think there was a lot of. I think it was a very valuable experience still working in smaller startups. But yeah, that was my first kind of experience after my master in Geneva. That's it.
Yeah, definitely good to know, because I think a lot of students sometimes feel the pressure of having to collect a lot of experiences during their studies, like 2-3 internships during their masters. So it's also interesting to see that, you could have a different path and still manage to get, a position within an IO. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Hello, Jasmine. Laura, thank you. I also study migration, so I relate. 2 questions. First, the thesis, of course, how do you guys budget time, if you can say it, the process? And if the topic of your thesis you are using in your work day, if you can say that. And second, I like the topic of probably nobody tells you the transition, no? The time to adjust. So I guess if you guys can map the biggest hurdles about, as you say, it's hard to leave the institute, no? So you just can kind of give us the heads up. Thank you, Laura.
Jasmine, you want to go first?
You can go.
Okay. Sure. So the first question was on the thesis in terms of time management, right?
How do you do it?
Yeah, so to be honest, I was a bit late and I had to rush it a little bit. I started writing in March. And yeah, I wrote about the experience I had in Ventimiglia. So I did I used some of my volunteering experience in the thesis. But then for later, for my job, I think depending on where you're applying to, you could even think about sending maybe some pages of your thesis for them to have a proof of your writing. But I didn't use it, or I'm not using, I'm not working on migration, so my thesis is not really relevant for what I'm doing with MSc right now. And for the second question, the transitioning, I wish I could give you advice on that. I just think it's time. You adjust to your new role. I also resonated with what Jasmine said on having imposter syndrome and maybe being new and not knowing your way around things. And I think it's, as she said, it's just you grow into this new role. And yeah, it's really boomery of me to say this, but I think I should have appreciated it a bit more when I was still studying. So enjoy the time you're having right now, even though it's thesis stress, and it's just a great experience to be at university, I think.
Jasmine?
Yeah, so I guess for me it was, I feel like, when you're in your studies, you have this kind of structured place. So you're not really too worried. But then you leave this space and suddenly the whole world is there and there's no like, you can go anywhere at that point. So it feels very like, what am I gonna do? Like, it's kind of up to you to decide. So that was a really like, that was something I had to deal with, and you're always so unsure. Um, and that's why I was really like pushing, like talking to people is really important, just to kind of see what others are doing. Especially for me, I had to see if there were any other ANSO students that did anything after their masters and that worked into IO. And I connected with some people, and it was really, really nice to talk to them. Um, yeah, and I think uh, with my thesis, I think there was a question as well for thesis. I started my internship remote actually, and it was the month right before I had to hand in my thesis, which was so crazy actually. I just spent the first like uh, most of my day writing, and then most of the day working, and then in the evenings I would just write. And so I remember just it was a brutal process for a full month, and especially at the start when you're, you know, can you still hear me? Okay, great. Um, at the start, it's like super. It takes a lot of energy when you're starting a new role, so it definitely was quite challenging. Um, and Also in terms of my thesis topic, I wrote about glaciers actually. So it was kind of funny, kind of now working into small islands, which is quite the opposite, but there's a lot of interesting parallels between the two. Uh, yeah, and I think the glacier people in UNESCO are just down the corridor, so it's every now and then I just go check on them, which is nice. Yeah, I'm not sure if I've answered it very well, but
Thank you, Jasmine. I think we have a question in the chat, right? So we have a question coming from Alexia regarding, the working culture, the work environment in both of the organizations. So maybe do you want to switch and have Jasmine answer first, and then I'll have you, Laura, answer after?
yeah, so the work culture. I think it's so dependent on your team. I think, I'm working in a very small team, so that's defining a lot of my experience, which actually has been super nice because I feel like I can rely on people very easily, which is actually very important when you're in such a big kind of organization. Um, what's, yeah, I think for me, I have I'm really lucky in having kind of a manager that really trusted me. So that was really, really, really nice for me because I could be involved even as an intern um, from the beginning. And that was, I think, a very important part of my whole experience. And I could kind of work on the relations within my team easily. And that was also a very nice way for me to transition to a consultant after my internship, uh, and engaging with people and them seeing me work. I think that was a very nice positive. There's also a lot of younger people here, so it's not just you. There's a nice intern community. There's a lot of consultants here, so that's also been really nice. Speaking with them and you know enjoying your lunch breaks with them, and there's also a social side of it, which is nice.
And you, Laura?
Yeah, same for the interns. So we're 5 interns at the moment, which is very nice because you get to exchange and spend some time with people who go through a similar experience. What I really like about the working atmosphere otherwise is that we are in a bilingual office, so we speak French and German. so everyone speaks the language they're more comfortable in. We also have a very inclusive language, and yeah, I think what I like about the working culture is that at Amnesty they're aware of certain issues, and they're sensitive to, for example, gender topics, and this also shows in work. I think they have a lot of understanding, and yeah, generally we're going through an organizational development, so they're trying to work with less hierarchies, but this is still on its way, so it's a bit difficult right now for everyone to find their new roles, because this development relies on every individual to take ownership of their work, and it's sometimes a bit unclear on how tasks are distributed, but I think that's just a normal process of such an organizational development. Yeah.
Thank you.
Given the budget cuts and the recent struggles IOs and NGOs have been facing, there's been a lot of talk of consultants, trainees, interns being given like increased responsibilities. I think you briefly mentioned it, Jasmine, but like, how's it like to navigate, and what advice would you give to, you know, being put in situations where you have more responsibilities, where you have to speak with important people, but also navigating the fact that like you're still an intern, you're still a trainee, you're still like a consultant starting off their career?
Yeah, I think it's not. It was something I kind of I'm still learning to do. I think it is tricky because I think there's a lot of protocols when working in this, at least in UNESCO. So you need to understand kind of where the lines are and knowing how to kind of operate within those boundaries. But I think it's nice, like my boss is kind of a bit of a rebel, which is very nice to work with someone like this. But for me, I think the whole like experience so far was really kind of in your ability to trying to gain confidence, and the isn't really someone there to kind of, I am forced into a situation role enable, for example. It's like being able to challenge yourself a little bit. I'm not sure if you could still hear me. You got cut off.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on our end or yours, but we're losing a little bit of connection.
Okay.
So I don't know if you could repeat what you said. After the rebel part.
I guess. Oh gosh, yeah. Okay. I think what I'm just trying to say is that like I think I keep getting cut off. So just yeah. Okay. I think what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of like situations where I've had to kind of be on my own and kind of take control a little bit, and I think just a matter of like challenging yourself and just doing it and telling yourself that you can do it is I think you learn so much. I mean, like I said before, it was during the summer period where suddenly, you know, we had certain deliverables and my boss said we have to reach those by the end of the summer, and most people are away. So suddenly I've had to kind of, you know, lead a lot of the coordination and do a lot of things I've never had to do before without supervision. And I hated the process, but in the end, that was such a moment for me. And that really helped kind of realize my potential and not be afraid to kind of take control a little bit. But yeah, it's a challenging space to know what you can and cannot do. So also understanding the landscape and how the organization operates and stuff is also important.
Both, right?
I hope you got.
knowing when to step down, I would say. Or like when I started, everyone told me it's very important to say no. You need to learn how to say no, and you're thinking that you can, but then you find yourself like having a project that you never really agreed to doing. So I think it's also just being mindful and checking in with yourself and knowing that you don't have to do everything, and like your own mental health is very important too. Yeah, just checking in on how stressed are you, and is this still within the scope of your internship? Are you learning still something, or are you doing an actual job? Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question coming in from Maurice. Do you feel that your experience at the moment is bringing you closer to where you imagined being after graduation, where you imagined being after your graduation? And what resources would you need to reach your next step? Maybe Laura?
Can I read it again?
Yeah. Do you feel that your experience at the moment is bringing you closer to where you imagined that you would be after graduation? What resources would you need to reach your next step?
Yeah, I think it brought me closer in that I learned how a big NGO functions from inside. I think that was a very important lesson. Also, me being here is was kind of a challenge for me. So I think it's continuous learning. Now I don't know if this is where I saw myself a year ago. I could not answer this, but I just think it's good to take the challenges, even though they do feel uncomfortable sometimes. They help you grow in the long term. I don't know if it was really an answer to the question, but maybe Jasmine has something smarter to say.
No, I think I'm pretty clueless with what I want to do next, to be honest. But I think I share that with Laura. Like, it was a really cool way to kind of understand how the UNESCO works, especially being in headquarters. I think when I arrived, a lot of people actually told me, go into the field. That's where you learn more, and they value that experience working in the field. But I think working in headquarters was also very interesting because you're you see kind of more in a broader way how the whole organization works, and that was also really interesting. And also, it's a hub, this where I'm working. So you get to meet a lot of very interesting people, and many people are coming into headquarters, and just having meetings at the end of my corridor was very interesting, and you kind of are exposed more to the sector, which makes the decision also very tricky because I have no idea. There's so many interesting kind of pathways you can take, but I think that that's something very valuable with my experience at UNESCO headquarters, is that you're very much exposed, and it's just, I guess, a matter of networking and reaching out and being seen a little bit and talking to people. Personally, I still don't really know, so I couldn't answer what I'm going to do next. So far, I've been enjoying the work, and there's a lot of things happening within my project, so we'll see from there.
We have another question for you, Jasmine, that's quite straightforward. Was your internship at UNESCO unpaid or paid? If it was paid, was it enough to move to and stay in Paris?
Yes, so when I did my internship at UNESCO, it was not paid. And I actually reached out to the career services, and because I was still a student for part of my internship, and I was a student in Geneva, but I did an internship abroad, I was able to get some funding from the Swiss government. So that was really nice, actually, to get that support, and I didn't know that existed. So reach out to career services about that if you're interested, because that was really helpful. Unfortunately, the internship was not paid. It wasn't a lot to support me completely. Also, Paris being very expensive city, but it was, something, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, just so you know, for the students who are not aware, there's the Movesia funding. If you're currently a student getting internship for your credit, getting credits for your internship, and you're doing an internship outside of Switzerland, you can request funding and we'll try to, support you in any way we can. Thank you, Jasmine. Any other questions? We still have 2 minutes before we close the session. If not, I have a question. Students are usually quite worried about how do you turn, and I'm also curious about what you're thinking about, how do you turn an internship into a consultancy or potentially like a long-term position if you're interested in staying in the organization? So, I mean, obviously, I know, Laura, you're in an internship right now at Amnesty. Maybe these are thoughts that you're having as well, or discussions you're having with your team or with yourself. So I'm just curious to see if any of you have to share on, on that aspect.
Yeah, it's discussions we have a lot as interns because many of us are interested in staying, and I think given that our office is quite small, we're around 70 people, you know everyone more or less, so this definitely helps if you want to reach out and know if you can stay. So of course the personal connection with the people, and then ideally you can also show some skills that you learned during your internship that would be relevant for the position. I know at least one other intern is currently undergoing the process of staying with Amnesty, so I know it's definitely feasible. It's just important to reach out to the people and to show your interest in the position, and also your capability of doing the job, of course. But yeah, I think within smaller NGOs, it's possible. I don't know for UNESCO bigger IOs.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very hot topic amongst interns. I think for the whole 6 months, it was hard to enjoy my internship and the work I was doing because we were so stressed on like, okay, what next? 6 months go really fast. But I think I spent most of my energy and time in my internship really just speaking to people and different teams in UNESCO, understanding what there is out there, and I think you can also get a better idea on the work other teams are doing, and maybe sometimes opportunities arise, and building connections with other teams is also important, but also within your own team. I think they obviously would value someone like an intern who already had, some experience to then take up a consultancy, because then you don't have to, train them again or anything. I think it's kind of logical step, but it's also so dependent on whether there is kind of an opportunity that arises or if there's funding. So I think it's always a mix of like, going out there, networking, speaking to people, knowing kind of maybe there are some teams that are opening up positions and kind of preparing in advance for this, just being proactive, I guess. But at the same time, knowing that it doesn't always go very smoothly. So I think it is a challenging environment to be in, because you have to kind of be prepared to always have plan Bs, and often these are short-term contracts, so it can be tiring, but yeah.
Thank you to both of you. This concludes the session. I'll turn it back to you, Sam.
Okay. Thank you, Laura and Jasmine, for this inspiring and thoughtful discussion. And thank you, Tiffany, for having hosted our roundtable. As a reminder, our next roundtable will take place next Wednesday, again from 12:30 to 2 in S8, where our panelists will talk about their careers in the private sector. Please check your emails for the link to register. I now invite all of you to join us for a small networking coffee break with some drinks and snacks just outside. For those of you who wish to talk to Laura, you can stay here and chat to them for another few minutes. Thank you and have a great day, everyone.